It's Sam and Rev, and we are picking up with our Scotland narrowboat trip. Now, in the first video, we told you how we planned that trip, what we searched for online, what company we chose, how we packed, and all that stuff. So in this video, we're going to be talking to you about going and what we did leading up to stepping on the boat.
And this is all in preparation for what I call the Scotland Loop, which basically goes between Glasgow and Edinburgh. So big picture wise, just to get to Falkirk, Scotland is going to take us a day or two. And then once we get to Falkirk, we're going to take a couple days to adjust to the time, get the lay of the land and provision. But first we have to get to Falkirk, Scotland. And that requires air travel from Dallas-Fort Worth Airport over to London Heathrow. So we get to London Heathrow, get through customs and all that stuff that you have to do, and then we have to change terminals. We went from London Heathrow into Glasgow Airport. Now, once we arrived there, I remember the biggest challenge was
we couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi to call an Uber.
At that point, we had both a T-Mobile phone and a Verizon phone, and I was trying on both how to get onto the Wi-Fi. Finally, talking to some stranger at the baggage area where we're trying to assemble and get an Uber, it came right up. That was rather quick. Once we got the Uber and found the gentleman, he took us into Falkirk, and it took about 45 minutes to an hour.
And what you should know about that is you can get an Uber from the airport, Glasgow, into Falkirk, but you cannot get an Uber from Falkirk back to Glasgow.
Yeah, we learned that about 2 weeks later. Once we got there, it was time to adjust to the time. Now, I do a little bit better than Rev on that.
That is very true.
Yeah, so that was the reason for having 2 nights in the Falkirk Premier Inn, which was really nice. They had breakfast for us both days.
They would have had dinner, but they were remodeling the restaurant.
Remodeling the restaurant, and even though it was the same restaurant for breakfast and dinner, I think they were remodeling in the afternoon, so we had breakfast there.
But they did tell us about a great restaurant that we walked to down the street.
Yeah, the Coppertop Inn.
Oh, Coppertop, yeah.
And that's where we learned the first time is that what they call a reservation is a booking, because we walked in and they said, "Do you have a booking?"
So we got settled into the Premier Inn, and I just took it easy.
I was like, hey, I am really wanting to walk around because the canal is right there. And so one of the areas that I was hoping that we might be able to do were the locks all the way up to the Kelpies. Now, we already knew, because I had been communicating with them, that there was a low water situation and that they were repairing some lock doors. But hopeful that I was, is that, maybe they got everything repaired and the water is going to be. And so I walked along and and it just seemed, there's no way that we're going to be able to take, hopeless. There were no boats on it. But I did walk quite a ways, probably about 5 or 6 locks until I said, you know what? This isn't going to work. So we pretty much have crossed that off the list. But we will make a visit to the Kelpies on foot. So after a good night's sleep, the first order of business is to make a reconnaissance run to the Falkirk Wheel and actually see that for the first time, as well as touch base with the folks at Black Prince.
We were able to walk from our hotel all the way to the Falkirk Wheel because the community is a walking community. There are paths everywhere. It's very different from the U.S.
It really is an amazing piece of engineering architecture, and the only one of its kind in the world.
It is a rotating boat lift that raises boats 80 feet. It connects Forth and Clyde Canal to the Union Canal.
It officially opened in 2002 during the dedication ceremony as part of Queen Elizabeth's Golden Jubilee celebration. Now, it replaced 11 locks, and that staircase of 11 locks could take nearly a day to navigate. So there are stories of the captains heading to the pub and getting some kids to take the boats over those 11 locks. And you would think by looking at it that it takes a tremendous amount of energy to turn that wheel, but by using counterbalancing, it really takes very little electricity for one rotation.
So on our 2-week trip, we were able to go through the wheel twice.
And the first time was on the very first day. So right there at the Falkirk Wheel is where the Black Prince office is, and we went in and visited with them, got the rest of our questions answered, and figured out where we were going to be the next day. One of the questions, though, I had was, we knew the Kelpies locks were out of the question because of the low water. But there was also this extension that we were talking about doing to bowling. Now that was 17 locks up and 17 locks back. The question was not whether there was enough water, but whether there was manpower to be able to man those locks for our trip up and our trip back. And as we talked to Gail and the folks there at Black Prince, they said the boat movement team is going to have to coordinate with you on that. And so we didn't get a real warm feeling we were going to do it. Plus, I think it was going to be pretty strenuous to do 17 locks one day, 17 locks the next day. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, yes.
And so we pretty much had written that off, and it would also impact our schedule, taking 2 days out of the schedule of the 14 we had. So we're pretty much crossing that off, but gosh, I always just had it in the back of my mind how neat it would be to go up all the way to bowling and back down.
From there, we walked to Tesco because we needed a burner phone. Tesco's like a Walmart.
Yeah.
But we needed a burner phone so we could call the boat movement team all along our trip. We got our phone, we went back to the hotel, and we could not figure out how to use the phone. You know, I think if we were criminals, they're the ones really that use burner phones a lot. We really could have used a tutorial or something to help us out.
Yeah, it had to do with SIM cards and everything.
Well, we took a taxi to a restaurant inn called Cook's, had a wonderful dinner there. And then we were going to go see the Kelpies. However, we could not find a taxi or Uber or anything to take us, so we just decided to walk. Well, we were going to see them earlier, but everybody we talked to said you have to see them at night. And that's our recommendation to you.
What are the Kelpies? The Kelpies are a mythological water horse that was believed to inhabit the lochs and rivers of Scotland. And they had the strength of 10 regular horses. They were sometimes described as shape-shifting creatures that could fatally lure the unsuspecting into the water.
You know, I read that their skin would become adhesive and the rider couldn't get off, and that's why they took them into the water.
No kidding, wow.
They were completed in 2013 as part of the Helix project, which created the park around them.
Yeah, and that park really was pretty neat. They would have concerts out there, and it also improved the connection between the Forth and Clyde Canal and the River Carron, which leads seaward to the River Forth.
So after a good night's sleep, I felt like I was adjusted to the time and ready to go. I could not get that burner phone working though, so we took it back to Tesco. They couldn't get it to work either, so that made me feel a little better. But they refunded our money. We stayed and got provisions. Had a little difficulty finding, for example, coffee creamer. So we asked a worker there, and she happened to grow up in Kentucky. And she said, well, we don't really have coffee creamer like you're used to in the States, and helped us find a switch for that.
And we really didn't want to buy a lot of food,
right,
because, you know, we're going to have to transport this back to the hotel and then from there taxi over. And we knew that along the way we were going to stop and eat at restaurants and all that. So this was really kind of a little bit to get us going for, you know, a couple days. Join us next time as we get checked out on the Narrowboat, going through all those procedures. We're going to head through a lock on our first day and do the Falkirk Wheel, couple of tunnels, and head west to Edinburgh. So see you next time on What Yacht to Do.